my overall motto is the only thing that never changes is things always change. So, you know, it's a constant evolution. You have to be more agile, you have to understand what that means, and you have to really think hard about what it is you're trying to deliver as value, and does it matter to the customer? And I think that is far more important than it ever was.
Tim, in your pre-podcast notes, you made a point about what advice you'd give to younger people, and it was to believe and be more ambitious. Does this mean that you think you've not been ambitious enough in your career?
Yeah, probably. I think it took me a while to figure out what that meant, and probably I didn't have enough self-confidence to truly understand what could be achieved.
Does that come with age?
Thanks.
Not saying that you're old or anything.
Yeah,
is that
many,
something
many
that you
do, Paul? Many do.
Is that something you mature?
Yeah, I think
into?
so. I think so, and probably confidence comes with age more than anything. Maybe I think you meet a lot of people, and you know I know plenty of young people that are incredibly ambitious. You know, maybe a little bit blindly sometimes, but also there's equally a lot of people that don't understand maybe what they could achieve if they really, really put their mind to it. And you know, we talked about this before. You know, I haven't been to college, I haven't been to university, I don't have any formal qualifications that say I should be able to do this. But over the years, I guess what I've learned is that nothing really is impossible. And I don't want to state that in some, you know, outrageous statement. But if you really want to achieve something, it's just about application and proving to yourself as much as anybody that you really want it. And I think you get noticed. And I think it's a rarer quality nowadays than perhaps it was a few years ago.
And when you talk about being ambitious and achieving, there are two elements to that. There's the desire to want to do it and the ability, isn't there? There's a balance between those two,
Absolutely.
which we mentioned.
Yeah.
But you're very pro the effort, the energy and the enthusiasm.
Definitely, because if, you know, I'm not saying ability is not of high value, because clearly it is. You know, you know, if I think of the business that I run now, you need people that can do the role, obviously. But equally, it's a lot easier to, I guess, get a person to be effective in their role if they really want to do it, as opposed to just have the ability to do it. And things can be taught, but that attitude is something that comes from within. And you can create environments that hopefully would draw that out, but it's a very self-disciplined, it's an internal desire that you develop. So, you know, I would go on somebody's attitude over any CV.
And do you, because I have this kind of opinion, very similar to that if I'm interviewing for a position, the CV kind of is secondary. It's what the person, how they present, and you say, and their want to succeed.
Yeah, because you can put anything on a CV, you know, and clearly a CV is designed to catch your eye, but ultimately after that it's a piece of paper. What's really the person? You don't really know that until you get to meet them, and to some degree until they really are, you know, working for you. Yeah. But absolutely, attitude, desire, wanting to achieve something is really important, and ambition comes in different ways as well. I don't think ambition is just about reaching a certain, you know, seniority within an organisation or responsibility. For me, ambition is about really doing something you enjoy doing and getting a huge amount of satisfaction out of it, whatever that is.
And before we go back to talk about some of your history and some of your journey, what's your role now, Tim? Can you maybe describe for our audience, for the people that don't know you, a little bit about what you're up to at the moment?
So I'm Managing Director for Hoffmann Group for the UK subsidiary, which is part of the European region for Hoffmann, Hoffmann being a global company. And we provide tooling, equipment and solutions predominantly to the manufacturing sector, not 100% that, but predominantly manufacturing. And I joined Hoffmann effectively to grow the business in the UK in 2019, increase the market presence, and build a long-term profitable and sustainable organisation.
And because where you came from, Cromwell Tools, you were Group Operations Director for 17 years.
No, I was Group Operations Director for 5 years, but I worked there for 17
years. So how did your position change then in that period? What did you start as? And clearly,
so I ended up at Cromwell by accident, I always say, because I worked for another company that was acquired. And in all honesty, when Cromwell acquired Apex, who I worked for, my immediate response was I was going to find another job and resign, because I'd competed against Cromwell for many years, and I just ethically didn't feel I could now go and say, this company that I've been trying to persuade you not to deal with, guess what, they're brilliant. So I was going to leave, and I had a couple of offers. And then the owner, a guy called Mike Gregory, and in those days the personnel director, before it was called HR, came and spoke to me and said, look, just give it 6 months. Just give it 6 months. We really want you to stay. Anyway, 17 years later.
He was quite a big character, wasn't he?
Mike Gregory, very
Mike Gregory,
big character, yeah. He was a big character, but he gave people the space to develop. He was a strong leader, and he knew what he wanted, and he could be very tough. But equally, he let you figure out how you could improve things, how you could run a business. And he always used to say, you run a region, that's the closest you'll ever get to your own business. It's your business, you grow it, you figure out what needs to be done. And yeah, he would guide you in certain ways, but he gave a lot of space. And for most of the time, actually, I reported directly to a guy called Mike Kerrins, who was the MD. Mike Gregory was the chairman a couple of years into my sort of tenure. And Mike was very, very similar.
So you had a lot of autonomy in it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Opportunity to succeed and to fail.
Correct. Yeah, I did both.
And when you sort of moved into obviously this is quite a long journey, but when you moved into a Group Operations Director, that's a big role at a big company.
Yeah.
What did that entail?
So at that time there was like a change in the structure, and what they wanted was a real focus on how we could improve the operating processes and model within the business. It was a branch-based organisation, so when I was there and when I first got the role as Group Ops Director, we had 54 locations. Customer service was all in these little branches, some bigger than others. So really the role entailed everything post receiving the order from the customer. So the sales team would get the order, everything managing that, processing that through, and delivery outside of the central distribution hub, because that was like one business unit. That was my sort of responsibility, and all the services, well, say my teams.
And what would have been the strengths, in your opinion, then, of Cromwell Tools at that particular time?
I think Cromwell had a market leading value proposition from the perspective of the product range and the services that was wrapped around that. They were very customer focused, relationship focused. It was pre the real growth of the web and online digital purchasing was not really very strong at that time. In fact, in the early years didn't really exist. So it was very much a face-to-face organisation, and definitely the value proposition they had in the product range meant that they were absolutely the market leader at the time. But that model needed refining as the market changed.
And what did you enjoy about that role?
The vast majority of the time at Cromwell I really enjoyed because of the people. I worked with some fantastic people that were really committed, and it really felt like a team. I think I got a lot of autonomy, as we talked about earlier, so I was, I guess, given the freedom to try some things that didn't work and find some things that did. And I think building teams of people, and really getting everybody focused in the same direction and working together was was, and I learned a huge amount. And I think it's really important not to underestimate what you learn from people giving you the chance to, practice almost and build your commercial muscle, your ability to be able to run a business can only be done if you're given the space to fail, because you learn very little from when everything's flying. And teams are really important. So, very quickly I sort of realised that whatever I was responsible for, the success of that was definitely not because of me, would never be because of me in isolation. It was about a team of people that would deliver on that. And I remember when I did get the group operations director role, the team that I was responsible for, which was 4 branches, about 9 or 10 people maybe, they knew I'd applied for it. So, when I had to tell them I was leaving and moving to Leicester, I got them all together to announce it. And I remember very clearly saying to them, I've got this job because of you, not because of me, because they made the region successful. Yeah. And that was the platform that I thought, that's why I've got noticed. And I don't think you should ever forget that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really refreshing way to look at it. And I suppose going from a group operations director into what is now a managing director's role, whereas previously, clearly it would have just been operations, it would have.
Yeah.
You've now got the whole business. So
yeah.
It's before the order, it's the order, it's the marketing, it's the accounting, it's everything, isn't
Absolutely.
it?
Yeah, and
so there's additional challenges with that.
Definitely, you've got the broad spectrum, of everything to think about. And what attracted me to the role at Hoffmann was a couple of things, but I wanted that broader responsibility. In the UK, Cromwell were and still are bigger than Hoffmann UK in a complete volume perspective. But the scope of responsibility here is now the whole business, to build the whole business, because we started virtually from nothing.
That's
so
really exciting.
No, very exciting, and that's one of the reasons I joined. And secondly, because I really believed in what Hoffmann wanted to achieve and how they wanted to achieve that, and their values very much aligned to my values, and that was why I sort of made the change, aligned with, I'd been at Cromwell a long time, the business had changed a lot, and I didn't maybe at that time still feel I was fully connected to the direction of the business. So,
but when you're running a company as well, I always find that you have every aspect to consider and think about in your mind, and often you challenge yourself with which bits you should spend more time on and which bits you should spend less, and which should come first. I would suggest that's probably one of the hardest things to be skillful at, because that can make or break.
Definitely.
We can all be busy fools, but at the same time we've got to make sure that the decisions and the time you spend on things are correct. There's a hierarchy of order, isn't there?
And it is the hardest thing. It definitely is the hardest thing, because there's no shortage of work, that's a fact. And we have a planning cycle that most businesses would have here, where we're January to December. So in the Q4 we're planning for the next year, and as a management team we'll sit down and say, right, what are our priorities for next year? And every time we do it, the biggest challenge is not finding what to do, it's deciding which bits of that you're going to do. And last year we included some sort of extended team into that conversation, because we wanted them to understand the challenge of prioritisation.
What wins in that situation? Give us an example of a few of those things that and which one would win and why.
So I guess we're trying to identify what things would have the biggest impact on our overall ambition, which could be different in given years, but currently it's growth and profitability. So how do we get the top line growing at the same rate, and how do we make sure that transfers into bottom line growth as well? So you got to figure out if you had to choose, which thing would you choose over everything else that would have the biggest impact? And you generally end up with a long list. So the biggest job is to try and get to the bottom of what, if we did that, what would be the result of that? Because it's easy to set, I don't know. You wanted an example, so let me think of an example.
I mean, it could be, in the growth and the finances. They're two key things, aren't they?
Yeah, but I've got an example. Okay. So, one of the part of the value proposition we have here is that actually we want to support our customers in being more successful themselves. So that clearly requires a level of technical expertise and business expertise. And we felt that to deliver that, we needed people that really understood customers, the market, and what we do as Hoffmann. It's virtually impossible to buy that in, and as we all know, talent is at a premium. So from a long-term perspective, we basically said, what's the impact as we grow of hiring people that can actually have the knowledge in those three areas? And because we couldn't hire them, we felt that was a real risk to our business growth. So we've created something that we call Hoffmann UK Campus. So we felt the biggest impact would be, let's create our own industry specialists. So let's invest in helping our team understand our customers, the market, and how we go to market. And that basically got pushed to the top.
That was the top of the list. Because
that's a long-term strategic objective that would give us sustainability. Over above saying, I don't know, how do we find more space in the warehouse?
Yeah. So. And this isn't the first business you've run, of course. We talk about going from ops director to managing director. You had your own company. And it didn't work out.
No, it didn't. So you talk about,
And you talked about learning by failing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was quite young. I probably didn't know what I was getting into, but I had an ambition to own the business. And I learned so much.
What was the company? Because you started.
It was called Turner's.
Okay. But it was a similar line, or
yeah, but it was a small, local, not even regional, local distributor of industrial supplies, tool and equipment. Did quite a lot of welding, and I did almost everything there. I started literally from school. So as I said earlier, I didn't go to college, didn't go to uni. I just thought I wanted to work. So I got this job. It was a friend that actually recommended me, so I didn't know who they were. And I worked on the trade counter. I worked in the office. I went out as a salesperson. I came back and ran the office for a while. Reasonably compressed period, I guess. And ultimately, the owner wanted to retire. So it's actually me and somebody else that worked there. We decided, let's make him an offer
to buy it.
Yeah, I would like to have said an offer he couldn't refuse, but he could have done, but he decided not to.
But this didn't work out, and this to me is this is where these types of conversations get interesting, because it's real life. So you're running a company, you're young, and it didn't work out. Why did it not work out, Tim? What happened?
Well, I was young, so I didn't have loads of cash to spend on it, and also I wasn't prepared to. It was a buyout over a period, and the company was over leveraged at the bank, really. That was the only reason it was affordable. Everything was secured on the property, and ultimately we just couldn't make enough profit to get out of our responsibilities to the bank. And also it was that time that maybe things were getting a bit tougher.
What period would this have been?
This was sort of late 90s up to 2000, and it was much harder to really grow. We didn't have the resources to get out of the very local area. It was a very traditional business, and I didn't have the know-how to do it. Let's be honest.
So you think if you could go back now to that business,
yes,
with what you've learned in the the last 2 decades,
Yeah.
would the outcome be different?
No, I wouldn't have bought it.
But let's say you had to buy.
I mean, what I learned was, I've learned a number of things, is that, I think I wanted to go into business because everybody said being your own boss is brilliant. And I felt that maybe would give me the autonomy and freedom to do some of the things that I wanted to learn. But I learned that certainly in that situation, you're not your own boss. Your boss is called a bank manager. And bank managers, no disrespect to any bank managers that are listening, but in my experience, were more than happy to help when things were great and didn't want to help when their money was at risk. So I always say, give you an umbrella when it's sunny and take it back when it's raining.
Yeah.
But that's because they've got a business to run. So I very quickly, I think, got more pragmatic about these things and less emotional. And I had to make the decision, or we had to make the decision, as I had a business partner, that do we try and tough it out, or do we actually do what's best for everybody and see if we can get a buyer for the business? We had some disagreements on that, but ultimately we sold it. I sold it for £1, and I never cashed the cheque.
And you've still got it?
No, I haven't actually. Well, I probably have, but I don't know where it is. But for me, that was not really relevant. But my approach after that was the organisation that bought us, which was Apex. So then my focus was, right, how do I make this work? Not, oh my God, I've failed, what am I going to do? I learned a lot from it. I was quite young, I was in my 20s. I had to run a P&L, I had to do cash forecasts, I'd negotiate with the bank. And I think that kind of experience I've brought with me. So that those things are just normal.
Because when you run a company, to me, you talk about when you work for somebody, you're paid on a monthly basis or whatever it might. When you run a company, I always consider the customer is your clearly is your source of income, but that's your boss almost, isn't it? To me, the customer is the boss. You also said to me as well, which I found interesting, that it's making decisions in businesses is quite hard, and you make a decision not based on yourself, but based on balance for the best of the company, which kind of is I suppose, an obvious strategy in a way, but that is underestimated as well, isn't it? Because it can be hard to be personally involved with people and things and not make the best decision for the company.
Absolutely.
Which I'm sure has happened on many occasions during your...
It's very tough. It's very tough. If you don't... If I didn't want that responsibility and some of the really difficult things that come with it, then I'm in the wrong job. But equally, you're balancing that against the fact that, you are also hopefully creating an environment and a business together with other people that gives a lot of people, stability and long-term employment. But yeah, you make some very tough decisions. And I think...
Do you ever make them quickly?
No.
Because I often find that the best... As you get older, you learn that making quick decisions is the worst decision, isn't it? Always take a step back, have a think, don't be hot-headed, because that can be disastrous.
I tend to consult, if I'm honest. The management team I've got here, for me, we're one team. It's not about hierarchy or anything. We do things together. I'm not saying I ask everybody about everything. Sometimes you can't do that. But it definitely is rare for me to make an isolated decision unless it clearly just has to be done.
And do you change your mind on things ever as well? Because that's, I always think if you're thinking about something, and do you have a problem with that if you do? Or is it...
No, I don't have a problem if I have to change my mind. I'm not, I don't particularly have any ego in that perspective. I would say one of the things that I've got better at over the years is, if anything, my worst critic would be me. So if I'm, maybe I'm challenging myself on whether that's right and whether I'm not completely convinced that I've made the right decision, and that can be a strength because it means that you don't make a rash decision, but it can be a weakness because it can be quite self-destructive.
Deliberating as well, though, I always feel there's a balance, isn't there, between pontificating and making a decision. And if my wife was watching this, she'd say, I just make decisions, and I do consider them carefully in my own mind, but I can't stand pontification either. I think that, you know, you can spend way too much time thinking about stuff, and when you just need to, sometimes by making 10 decisions and getting quickly or in a reasonable time frame and getting 8 right is better than never making any decisions.
And if you don't make a decision, you'll never know whether it was right or wrong anyway. And you know, I would say, you know, when we have discussions in the business, I would always say, you know, a decision is better than no decision. So definitely, but I think you definitely become more aware of when to do that and when not to, and it's on the size of the impact. But you know, I think as MD, your role is to direct and create direction and vision, and it's not to decide what needs to be done. You have to build a team that you absolutely trust, that are far closer to what really goes on than I'll ever be.
In those particular
Correct,
areas.
you know, so...
it's sometimes hard to
Because you care.
Yeah,
Because you care. But I have, you know, with the team here, sometimes they'll come and speak to me about something and they'll say, you know, I mean, not my management team, this is maybe the broader team. We're working on this and we've done this, what do you think? And I have to look at them and say, I really don't know what you're talking about. Because they assume that I would know. But actually I have no idea.
but do you ever get involved in a situation like that where you start getting into it and you go, oh, hang on, I shouldn't even be doing this. Why am I even entertaining this? This is not part of my role or responsibility. That's for somebody else to
a lot.
To
yeah, I have to. But maybe not so much now. But yeah, a lot, because it's not because I want to particularly interfere. It's because I really enjoy it and it interests me. But if you build a team that you trust, you probably do that less.
Yeah. What do you think about UK manufacturing at the moment, Tim? Where we are as a country compared to our, I mean, you're a European business, essentially. Do we do things differently?
Yes. You know, we do things differently as in the UK market, or how I would say how our customers behave is very different. If I, you know, I go back to Germany, you know, it's
Give us an example,
very different. You know, so I'm generalising, and I recognise that there's probably quite a lot of people that listen to this podcast will say that's not the way we operate, and that is absolutely accurate. But in broad terms, I think UK manufacturing does not think enough about how we can be more efficient and productive. Tends to be very often short-term thinking. If you went to Germany, you would find that they're very efficient because they've invested. You know, they already have a lot of the systems and the processes that sometimes providers or suppliers are expected to give their customers. They've got them themselves. So that there's a balance on there that affects us as an organisation. But I would say in the UK, there's not enough focus on productivity and efficiency, and there's far too much focus on how much does that cost.
And why do you think that short-term vision exists, though? Is it about
I think it's
a quick route? Want a quick route to? I'm more worried about earning £10 today than £20 tomorrow.
Yeah, possibly, and culture, and you know, that's a good question. I don't know whether I've fully got the answer to that.
Do you see areas where that is changing, or do you simply think it's
no? It's
kind
just, I don't know whether it's changing, but I think there are plenty of organisations that are thinking differently. And I guess it's the pressure on your organisation as well. You know, there's maybe you've got the ability to do long-term thinking. Maybe it is a crisis management. You know, it's been a tough period the last few years, but they're the type of organisations that do recognise where the real opportunities are that we want to work with. So, you know, we're in the lucky situation at the moment. We don't need to deal with everybody. We can go and find those type of organisations that understand focusing on where your highest costs are, which is not what you buy that product at, it's how that is applied. That's where the big savings are. That is almost a given if you went into Germany. To be fair, I think the further west you come, the less it is like that.
But do you think when you look at us as a manufacturing base, we don't make enough? We assemble a lot,
yes,
but we don't make enough, do
Correct.
we? would that in turn then reflect into the outcomes that we're talking about? People actually thinking, well, do you know what? I can't see many opportunities. I don't know where the opportunities are going to come from. So therefore, I've got to think about today rather than tomorrow.
Yeah, but I think it's also a chicken and an egg situation. So clearly we have challenges competing, on the global stage because we're not a low-cost country. Our labour costs aren't low. In fact, they're very high. And there to compete, we have to be more efficient.
So we should look at it
absolutely
in the reverse.
So that's why I'm saying that doesn't happen, and maybe that's the reason that we struggle to compete, is because we're looking at the wrong things. I think understanding that the biggest things you can affect, certainly that we get involved with in an organisation, are non-production overhead. Obviously we supply indirect material and direct overhead. Forget the material, those are the two areas. In a production environment, they're the two biggest costs outside of infrastructure, etc. But what we tend to focus on is this small percentage of the price of what we buy it at, rather than figuring out how can reduce the overall cost. If we did that, I believe in a general sense, UK manufacturing would be more competitive on a world stage.
Yeah, so how on earth do we change that? Because this is a conversation that's been happening for for a long time.
It has, yes.
And getting people to have that intention in their mind, it takes not just investment, but it takes investment in time as well, doesn't it? It's the longer term strategy.
Correct. And the only thing I could say in a couple of areas here is this. We could say the government should give more tax relief against investment. They should certainly speed up the rate at which we're doing international trade agreements that would maybe open doors and remove barriers. And all those things are true. However, we have to take ownership as people who are custodians of our own businesses to say, how can we also look at how we can run our business more efficiently?
How can we cope with the restrictions or any things that are put to us, rather than whinging and moaning about it and getting on with it and looking at the solution?
Because we've got some really great organisations, great products that we produce, great people, high skill. Second biggest market for aerospace says something about the technical skill we have in the UK, but we're not always translating that into how we can improve our overall manufacturing base. And I think that's really critical, and it's what attracted me to this role at Hoffmann, because that is what we try and do with our partners. So I think you have to look internally, not just sometimes go and expect somebody else to.
And when you say, Tim, earlier on about people keep or we tend to go, how much is that? How much? Do you, with that in mind, and you hearing that so commonly, do you try and behave yourself very differently in your life? Do you ever find yourself doing exactly the same and thinking, hang on a minute, I'm questioning the cost of this when I should be thinking? Like when you buy your Spurs season ticket.
Yeah, well, that's a pretty quick decision. It's like, I'm not paying that much. No, because I'll never get there. No, I don't know, because I think in your personal life, what you do is often more desire driven, as opposed to through some logical, process of what's the most cost effective way. So if my wife ever watches this, I'll be in trouble. But we're just recently getting Helen she needs a new car when her lease is up in at the end of the summer. And from Helen's perspective, it's not really about how cost effective the car is, it's what colour is it and what do the wheels look like. Yeah. And I know that sounds a bit disparaging, I don't mean it that way, but I think in personal life you make decisions based on your own emotion and what you want. In business, I think we have to be far more pragmatic, and we have to think about what is the best thing for the business. So I would probably say no. I don't.
What car is she going to decide on?
She's actually getting a Hyundai Kona electric one.
Yeah. So. And for you then, Tim, going forward, you're in this role now, clearly successful at it. What's the future for you? What's your real ambition to get out of this role? Because everybody runs a company. It's not just about money. It's it's about self-satisfaction
Correct.
of what it does for you as a person.
Yeah, so, we were talking about this earlier, and I think, I don't actually think of this as a job, genuinely, and I do also recognise that is a very fortunate position to be in, and not everybody can enjoy that sort of employment situation. But I will do this for as long as I'm getting the same level of satisfaction out of it as I am now, and Hoffmann still want me. But at some point, that's I'm sure that will change. At which point I'd expect to travel more than we do now, because I like travel, and that's our ambition, both of us.
And who do you admire in business?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a very good question. I don't think I would pick out one person. I think.
Do you ever think, what would they think or do in this situation?
Probably not. If I'm really honest with you, I don't have an individual that I think this person is, who I model, or I feel is the person that is close enough to who I want to be. I think you can take lots of things from different people. I would have to say at Cromwell, being there so long and reporting to both Mike Combs and Mike Gregory, you learn a huge amount, and it would be, I'd be lying if I didn't say that I took a lot away from that and probably moulded, my approach to business. But I'm very much somebody that I think you can take pieces from everywhere, and I think everybody's got strengths and weaknesses. So I would find it really difficult to say this person. I'll listen to podcasts, I'll listen, read books, and I think you can take a lot of inspiration from those type of things. So that's a difficult question. I probably can't answer it directly.
And business, is it changing direction these days? Are things, not just here at Hoffmann, but in your mind, we're all getting older. There's a lot of the younger generation coming through. They do things very differently.
Yeah.
So we have to adapt in accordance with that. Correct. Is business changing in your mind?
I mean, my overall motto is the only thing that never changes is things always change. So, it's a constant evolution. And I think you have a number of different things probably impacting that at the moment. Absolutely, I think, younger people getting into businesses and into industry now, we have to be able to adapt, I think, as employers to some of those requirements and sometimes demands, if I'm honest. Despite some of the challenges that we've had over the last few years, the world is a much smaller place than it was 20 years ago. So we have to be able to compete globally. Digital applications and the way of doing business digitally removes barriers. You have to be more agile. You have to understand what that means, and you have to really think hard about what it is you're trying to deliver as value, and does it matter to the customer? And I think that is far more important than it ever was.
And are you personally a social media fan? We talk about the way the world's changing. When you get home at night, are you sitting there scrolling through TikTok and Facebook?
No. No, I'm not. I don't. Not that I'm against it or anything, but I think my social media, I think, connects people, and I think that's a good thing. I've got friends now in other parts of the world that I wouldn't be able to have without, those platforms. But equally, I fear the misinformation, and that is a danger, and I try not to get too sucked into that. So I probably use it more specifically when I want to contact people that I already know, as opposed to sat there going through everything, But that could be an age thing.
Well, Tim, it's been an absolute pleasure today. Thank you for being part of this podcast. It's great to learn more about you, and good luck in your role here.
Thank you very much.
Hoffmann.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.